Hi, I did my presentation on the Kawésqar indigenous tribe of South Chile. The Kawésqar are one of 9 officially recognized indigenous tribes in Chile. The name translates roughly to human being, and the more literally translation is men of skin and bone. They've been called a few different names, including the Alcafra and the Halacupla. They lived in the southern part of Chile, traveling from island to island in the Chilean Patagonian territory. They were separated into 4 major tribes within these territories. These tribes were the Salem, the Kawésqar, the Kawésqar, and the Kawésqar. Although they weren't classified as separate, there was no difference in culture and way of life, but they had different dialect of language and they lived in slightly different regions. The map on the left shows the breakup of territory between the 4 divisions, while the map on the right shows the Kawésqar tribe in regards to the neighboring indigenous tribes. As it shows, the Kawésqar had quite a bit of territory they lived in, even though they mainly stayed traveling between the islands rather than on the mainland. The Kawésqar were hunter-gatherer nomads, which means they were prone to travel and move around more often, which made them live in more permeable temporary housing. They used canoes as their primary way of travel, as it was the easiest way for them to travel from island to island where they lived. They lived in igloo-shaped dome huts called ats, which were built out of twigs and branches and covered with hides from animals. They hunted that were easily set up and taken down to allow them to travel often. The men were more in charge of hunting, making tools. They didn't make a lot of different types of tools, as they would use one tool for multiple jobs. The main tool was a harpoon, spear type weapon used for hunting and building, and the men also built the shelters. While the women were in charge of raising the children, Kawésqar children were actually not given a name until they were old enough to walk and talk without assistance, and mothers would often carry the youngest kid on their back, handling the canoes and gathering shellfish and other food and plants. Family was an essential part of the society for the most part. Families would be more independent and live with each other and away from other families within the tribe. But the tribe would come together to send out small hunting and gathering groups. Unless they came across a beached whale, then all the families in the tribe would create a more permanent camp, as the whale would provide enough food for all the families of the tribe for an extended period of time. They also used this time to perform certain cultural ceremonies, such as a coming of age ceremony for the children of the tribe and various spiritual ceremonies to help the tribe stay in a good natural balance with nature. When they moved on, they did have a chief who was usually either the strongest man in the tribe and was handed a title from the previous chief for being family and a close friend. The chief was mostly there to lead hunting trips. The top picture shows an at being constructed. It will later be covered with hides, while the bottom shows what the canoes would have looked like. The culture was less of religious beliefs and more of a belief in a natural harmony and order of things in the world. Everything had a place and a job to do, which is why they used every piece of the animals they killed and didn't take more than was required to live. They didn't place any importance on having material possessions as long as they had what they needed to live. They did believe in spiritual forces that can break this natural harmony, including the spirit Exolas, which was the supreme being of creation, and Ajima, who was an evil spirit that was responsible for death and sickness. They also had a shaman or medicine man who was called a Unwakan. The Unwakan was only called for serious illness and injury. Minor ones were taken care of within the family. The Kawésqar was a smaller indigenous tribe, with the population being estimated at about 3,000 to 4,000 up until the 18th century, and when the area started to see a rise in settlement from Europeans. By the 1800s, more of Chile was being colonized and settled by Europeans, resulting in extended contact between the Kawésqar and settlers, which resulted in a drastic reduction in the population of the Kawésqar. as the Kawésqar was unable to survive the contact and everything the settlers brought over. By the end of the 19th century, the Kawésqar population had dropped to an estimated 500, and continued to decline until 1971, where there was believed to be about 47 Kawésqar people left. And today it is believed there is about 10 blood Kawésqar people left in Chile, making it very likely that in the not so far future the Kawésqar could all but become extinct. Although a census done in 2002 reported there were 2,622 people who identified as Kawésqar, some experts believe this number is greatly exaggerated, as there were no guidelines that dictated who can identify as Kawésqar, which means all 2,622 may not have had Kawésqar blood, but rather just identified as Kawésqar, and as they believed in the practices, the culture, and the language. The Kawésqar language is a dying language. It's one of the Fujian languages such as the Yaghan and Silk now, but these languages don't share similarities other than being classified as Fujian languages. The language has no official name but has been referred to as Kawésqar, which translates to talk. After contact, since the settlers couldn't speak Kawésqar, the official language became Spanish, and bilingual laws were set that required the Kawésqar to learn Spanish in order to communicate with the settlers, resulting in the traditional language being spoken primarily in private dwellings and less people passing it on to future generations, making the language become less and less spoken and slowly dying off. The top picture here shows some Kawésqar kids dressed in the hides they would occasionally wear. They didn't always dress in hides. Quite often they wouldn't wear anything but cover themselves in animal fat and whale blubber to keep warm, and rather use the hides to cover their hats. The bottom picture shows one of the spiritual ceremonies that they would partake in. First contact between the Kawésqar and settlers was in 1526 when Spanish explorer Kawésqar Presentation landed in the territory. Settlement didn't really happen much in this area until the 1800s. By 1880, most of Chile and the Patagonia had been settled to some degree, as Europeans were hunting for gold, furs, and wolves to ship back home. Kawésqar was the first governor of the Magellan colonization territory, and was one of the first people to start a belief of violent encounters between the settlers and the Kawésqar, as he believed them to be savages and an obstacle for settlement. In 1881, 5 Kawésqars were kidnapped from their lands by a German animal trader, Karl Hagenbeck, and were displayed in shows across Europe in what were called human zoos. The show was titled in Paris, "The Savages from the Land of Fire." They died while being held in these zoos, and it wasn't until the 2000s when their remains were given back to the Chile government and the remaining Kawésqar, so that they can be given a cultural funeral rites. This slide just has a picture of Kawésqar and Kawésqar. Contact continued. The settlers introduced the rise in livestock and farming in the area. They also brought multiple diseases into the area that started to infect and kill the Kawésqar. It wasn't until the 1900s that the Kawésqar started to see a rise in violent interactions with settlers. Although they were often the victims of violence from the settlers earlier, it was more viewed as punitive violence between them, as the Kawésqar would be blamed for various interactions and crimes that happened within the settlements. In the 1930s, the belief that Kawésqar were savages and born between being human and animals increased the sense of privatized violence, where settlers would go out of their way to blame the Kawésqar for certain things and actually kind of hunt them down to execute them, using all these as an excuse to kill them. The changing of the culture in the area, the introduction of diseases and violent interactions, made it near impossible for the Kawésqar to survive this extended contact, which is why we saw a dramatic reduction in the population. As mentioned, due to the population being extremely small, the traditional language and culture are on the verge of becoming extinct, as there are less people to pass on the traditions and language to future generations. The few remaining Kawésqar people have settled on Wellington Island in South Chile. There are a couple legislations that have tried to protect and recognize this Kawésqar cultural and rights, including the UN declarations on the rights of indigenous peoples, and more specific to Chile, the ICCs, on the indigenous peoples and local community conserved areas and territories. Although the ICCAs weren't recognized completely by the government as law, and there was no direct support for them, they laid out some guidelines on ways to help preserve the different indigenous peoples' territories and cultures. Although the Kawésqar and Canadian indigenous peoples lived vastly different in terms of what happened after first contact and the settlement, there are some similarities and differences between them. For the Kawésqar, there was less of a focus of setting up trading posts and trading relations and assimilating them in the European culture, and instead, the Spanish settlers focused on removing and eliminating the Kawésqar from the territory to open space and settlement. In both cases, the introduction of a completely different culture and beliefs, new diseases and violent interactions between settlers and indigenous peoples resulted in a major reduction in indigenous population in the area. Both have had some kind of recognition that the rights and culture shouldn't be protected, with the UN document and the government starting to see what happened as a tragedy that it was. Both cultures are still slowly becoming at risk of being forgotten and extinct, especially in the Kawésqar case. And these are some references I used. And yes, and that's the end.